There is your boss. You are with Legions of Caesar, and today we are looking at the 15th to the 17th of November 1796 in our latest battle about the Napoleonic Wars, and today is the Battle of Arcole. After the defeat at Lodi, the Austrians had retreated to gather reinforcements before once again moving towards northern Italy to reinforce the besieged fortress at Mantua. To do so, they created two armies, one under the General Davidovich, moving south from the Tyrol with about 18,000 men, whereas the main force of about 28,000 men was marching from the east under Joseph Alvinzi. Napoleon knew that two Austrian armies were moving on his position from two separate directions, and he also knew that if these armies united in their superior numbers, he would have a very difficult time in beating such a large force. So his strategy at this point was to try and intercept the armies one by one to try and defeat them both individually. The battlefield was dominated by two rivers, the river Arcole to the east and the river Adige on the west. The town of Arcole was on the east bank of the Arcole river, whereas the town of Belfiore was to the northwest of the French position. In between the two rivers was dominated by very marshy land, which was difficult for both armies to cross. The Battle of Arcole began on the 15th of November. Napoleon sent a small force under Andres Massena to cover his left flank, and then began to attack the town of Arcole by storming the bridge. And despite heroic attempts by the French forces to do so, they were held back by the Austrians. Napoleon did make his grand gesture here though, grabbing a French flag and trying to attempt to cross the bridge himself before being held back by one of his officers. Alvinzi began to reinforce the defenders at Arcole and also attacked Massena's position at Belfiore. And while a third French force did manage to cross the Adige River south of Arcole, it was too late in the day to have any impact on the battle. The 16th of November was very much the same as the previous day. The French once again tried to storm the bridge at Arcole to no more success, whereas Massena was again successful in defending the town of Belfiore and therefore defending Napoleon's flank. The second day of the battle was a success for Napoleon though. He continued to use up more of the Austrian resources as the battle had become a battle of attrition by this point, but also he continued to threaten Alvinzi's lines of communication back towards Austria. The morning of the 17th of November, Napoleon decided to push once again. He sent part of Andres Massena's force again to hold the Austrians at Belfiore, but Massena, the star of the day, was able to ambush an Austrian force approaching from across the bridge at Arcole, defeating the Austrians and managed to rout them. Napoleon sent a small contingent to cross the stream south of Arcole, and in a tactical masterpiece ordered 4 trumpeters to make as much noise as possible. This threw the Austrians into confusion, believing a much greater force was actually approaching them from the south of Arcole, and caused them to panic. The confusion caused by the small French force south of Arcole allowed Massena to again attempt to cross the bridge. This time the French though were successful, Alvinzi realising that the threat to his lines of communications was now too great and the French had taken the day.
So there we are.
that was the Battle of Arcole. Over the course of the 3 days from the 15th to the 17th of November, the Austrians had lost about 7,000 men, whereas the French had lost about 4,500 men. But Napoleon did achieve his strategic objective of stopping the two Austrian forces from joining up and combining their forces. So in the immediate days after the battle, Napoleon decided to turn towards the second Austrian force. He tried to engage Davidovich's army and had some brief skirmishes against them, but essentially they were able to retreat intact. So Napoleon did fail his second strategic objective in also engaging the second Austrian force. But it did mean that the Austrian counterattack to relieve the siege of Mantua basically had the same fate as the first one, which culminated at Lodi. Albinci's force had suffered a very sharp turn in fortunes, going immediately from the offensive to retreating back towards the Tyrol, away from Mantua, and the fortress there only had about 4 to 6 weeks of food left at this point, so they were in pretty dire straits. But Arcole itself had actually been quite a close call for the French as well. It was only Napoleon's brilliance, essentially, that had averted catastrophe in the face of overwhelming Austrian numbers coming from two separate forces. And Arcole was probably the climax of the War of the First Coalition as well, and some would say it was Napoleon's greatest achievement to date as well. But the German military strategist Karl von Clausewitz, he said of the battle, "What is it then that turned this hotly contested battle into a victory for Napoleon? It was a better use of the elements of tactics, a greater bravery in the field, a superior mind, and boldness without any limits." But Napoleon's work wasn't done. The Austrians still had the will to fight against the French, and they still had the forces to be able to do so. So they were later on to make one final attempt to relieve the fortress of Mantua, and that culminated in the Battle of Rivoli. But Napoleon had shown elements of his genius here at Arcole, and although the battle was close, a close run affair, and it did turn into a battle of attrition, which is why I think that Arcole itself is perhaps not the best example of Napoleon's brilliance in the field. But what I really liked about the battle itself, though, was Napoleon's attempt to try and split the two Austrian forces. This was a tactic he would use many times in his career, while often fighting against overwhelming numbers from multiple coalition partners against him. And it's a very early example of Napoleon trying to engage two separate forces before they could link up and combine their superior numbers against him. So what are your thoughts on Arcole? Was Napoleon really deserving of the praise that Karl von Clausewitz gave him on the day? Am I right in thinking that the battle showed Napoleon's strategic brilliance in dividing these two Austrian forces? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments, guys. This is Legions of Caesar. Thank you very much for watching. It's very much appreciated, and I'll see you again soon.